Welcome to Business Better, a podcast designed to help businesses navigate the new normal. I'm your host, John Wright. After serving nearly 15 years as Senior Vice President and General Counsel at Triumph Group Incorporated, a global aerospace component supplier, I'm now a member of the Securities and M&A groups at Ballard Spahr, a national law firm with clients across industries and across the country. This episode is part of our Women in Finance series and features an interview with Mary DiMartino, Executive Director at JP Morgan Securities, where she focuses on public finance and fills other roles you'll hear about. Ms. DiMartino talks about her background and career path, the kinds of projects she works on, her experience in recruiting, and the impact of the pandemic on the work environment and the use of technology. Speaking with Ms. DiMartino is my Ballard Spahr colleague, Emilie Ninan, a partner in our Wilmington, Delaware, and Washington, D.C. offices, and co-chair of Ballard Spahr's Finance Department. With that, we'll turn the episode over to Emilie and her guest, Mary DiMartino.
Good afternoon, Mary. Thank you for joining me today. I know we've worked together for quite a while, but I'm excited to have this opportunity to get to know you a little bit better and sort of your journey to finance. So I appreciate you making the time.
Well, Emilie, thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here and always enjoy talking with you.
So you currently are an executive director for public finance banking at JP Morgan Securities. Can you start by telling us a little bit of what you do in your current position?
Sure. So as a senior banker, I work with a team of bankers at JP Morgan covering state and local issuers, primarily in the Northeast. I also cover clients in Virginia as well. And in that role, working from beginning to end in terms of client coverage, pitching ideas, executing transactions, and just sort of maintaining client relationships. So, that's broadly what I do. And in addition to state and local governments, I get the chance to work with transportation agencies and utilities, including water utilities, which is sort of a nice sort of array of clients to cover. As I say to the newest members of our team, you'll find that this is very much a relationship-oriented business. And so those relationships, certainly, particularly with professionals like yourself, Emilie, financial advisors, and other firms that serve as underwriters counsel, they cross clients. And so, in addition to covering clients directly, certainly working with the broader industry. And so that really has given me a chance to have a chance to really delve into some really interesting and exciting transactions over the years. In addition to banking, I also wear sort of this hat that we call the resource manager. And it's a role that I raised my hand for a couple of years ago. In that role, I have the opportunity to oversee our recruitment for our summer intern program that we have at JP Morgan. So I oversee that for public finance banking. I also work with our summer interns when they get here through that process, as well as overseeing full-time training for those newest analysts that join our program. So, that's a sort of separate but related set of responsibilities that I have, which sort of is a nice complement to the very quant-oriented work that I would do as a banker. So I get to sort of work on soft skills, if you will, in my role as resource manager.
Yes, a lot of different roles you're holding there. So I want to hear more about that. But before that, I'd like to hear about your background and sort of your path to finance. It's always interesting to me to hear people kind of always knew they wanted to be a finance and, make that direct beeline to it, or whether it was a little bit, little meandering in there.
So unlike so many of the young individuals that I meet today through our recruitment program and those who join us and those at other firms, I had no idea what public finance was when I was at the tender age of 21. What I would say is when I entered college, I wanted to be a chemistry major. I entered as a chemistry major and held that major for just about 2 years in college. And I I realized actually the beginning of my sophomore year that when I had to spend it was a semester in very intense lab work, that I enjoyed talking more than I enjoyed working in a lab, and I realized that really being in chemistry wasn't going to be the right place for me. So I changed my major to economics, since I had taken some economic classes, and so that sort of got me interested, if you will, into sort of, let's call it, the economic side of government. But the other passion that I discovered in college, which I actually think has really been a bigger driver for me personally throughout my life, was my involvement in what I'll say are like student government. I went to Rutgers University, and when I was there, they had a separate women's college, Douglas College, which still exists today in a different form. And that experience really, in some ways, changed the way that I looked at myself and the world around me in terms of community engagement, political engagement. I came of age at a time just following sort of the debate on the ERA. And so for me, I really found a passion in what I'll say is public policy. So my major was a nice complement to what I really felt was my interest, is public policy. So when I got out of college, I was going to work for somebody on the Hill. That was really my plan. And I happened to be referred for a job at a small financial advisory firm, Government Finance Associates. That was that Chester Johnson who has since retired. That was his firm. And they offered me a position to be an analyst. And I thought, I have no idea what a bond is. But, they're offering me a job. If I don't like it in a year, I will, I could still go to DC, get into public policy, and I, have some money in the bank. And when I got there, and within a few months, quickly realized that this was really the place I wanted to be, because I found that the heart of any policy is the money behind it. And so that's really what has really sustained me in my tenure here in public finance. And really the reason I enjoy it so much is because I have a chance to see the other side of sort of public policy, working with clients as they make the decisions about what it is that they want to finance. I get to work with them on developing the financial plan, which, there's so much more to our work, as in terms of covering credit and bringing securities to market. But that is really how I found public finance. It was a little bit by accident, and certainly wasn't intentional. But once I got there, my time here has been very, very intentional since.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about public finance until I started working as well. But how did you make that switch from financial advisory side to JP Morgan, or the banking side? What took you there?
So I was with a financial advisory firm for about 3.5 years. And I had been very active at the time doing what was lease purchase financing. It was very, very common in New Jersey by school districts. And I was approached by a banker to join her banking team. And that's really how I made the transition from being on the advisory side to the banking side. And it was, with a small regional firm that had a sort of an expertise, if you will, in this particular area. So that was really the start of my time in banking. And then from there, I joined a regional bank that is now known as Wells Fargo, before I joined JP Morgan in 2007.
Okay, so you've been at JP Morgan quite a while at this point. So what's kept you there?
I think from my perspective, what I have enjoyed is and is really the culture of the firm. It's very much an organization that certainly has a broad platform, and so to be able to serve clients from a credit perspective as well as an underwriting perspective and in other ways is important to me. I would also say that it is committed to this business. I've seen that in the way that it looks to identify personnel resources as well as technology resources. And I think that's been important to me as well in the work that I do. And I enjoy the people I work with. I'm lucky in a sense. I'm based in Philadelphia, but I go into New York because of certainly the bond work that I do, but also my work as a resource manager. And there is also a community of bankers in Philadelphia who do other business through JP Morgan Chase. But we work together on employee engagement and, supporting organizations in Philadelphia. So I'm very fortunate the people that I have around me that I get to work with directly on my team, as well as others that I can engage with more broadly at the firm, is probably another reason I have stayed with JP Morgan as long as I have.
Yeah, I didn't realize till now that you joined JP Morgan the year I joined Ballard. So we've been at our current places the
right
same amount
before
of time.
the Great Recession.
That's right. Timing. But it's definitely the people that still keep me here as well. It's so important that you like the people you work with because you spend so much time with them. So Mary, given the experience that you've had in the industry now, is there a matter or a client that stands out to you?
I actually get asked that question by individuals who are interested in the business. Is there a transaction or a project that you worked on that's notable? First, let me just say, what has kept me in the business also are the clients themselves. I love the work that they do, that I get to do with them, and I truly enjoy it. Probably one transaction or project that stands out that really resonated for me because I felt like it made a difference at a difficult time. And that was I believe it was in 2009. And the city was waiting for the Commonwealth, the General Assembly, to act on an increase in some revenues to help the city sort of manage at that time what was the Great Recession that they and other governments were going through. And they needed a facility. I realized that they needed a cash flow facility to help sort of bridge them from, the middle of the summer till the time that they expected the General Assembly to act. And so brought the idea to the treasurer at the time and presented and said, if this is something that you're interested in, we're talking to other clients. And long story short, it ended up being something that they needed. And it was important to help them provide that facility, helped them provide funding to some of the social service agencies that were serving the city residents. And so it was sort of an idea that I really had that I didn't think, they would need, but it turned out to be something very important to them and critical to helping them in that period of time where they needed to bridge some funding. And so that's probably where I felt like, here really clearly, I felt like I could see the dollars going directly to helping some of the residents at what was a difficult time then in 2008 and going into 2009.
Wanted to go back to talk about your role as a resource manager. I'm interested to hear, maybe how recruiting has changed or what you're doing to get people interested in this area, especially public finance. It's not always top of mind.
Recruitment is done broadly with the firm. And what I would say that I have observed in this role, which I've had, I think, since 2014. So I've had it for about a good 6 years. So I've had a chance to really observe sort of more behind the scenes how the firm goes at recruiting. And what I would say is, I'll start with and say, there's been a continued commitment to diversity. And I know that's certainly always is an important topic, but certainly one that's been top of mind for certainly the last 18 months. But it has been an important focus for JP Morgan. And what I have seen is every year, they don't just decide, okay, this is the year that we're going to do our focus and create diversity opportunities for diverse candidates. Every year they revisit what they did. Did we have success? How can we change it? And each year they build on it. And so I would say, from my own observation, it's really shifted to looking more broadly for candidates for banking, investment banking, and looking at candidates at smaller schools, large schools, and not just any particular, not just the Ivy Leagues, where you also get excellent candidates as well. So I would say there's a real effort to bring in a broader spectrum of candidates, particularly diverse candidates, into the program. In terms of public finance and bringing young talent, diverse talent into public finance, that can be a challenge sometimes. I think particularly at a place like JP Morgan, many individuals think about, M&A banking. They think about corporate banking. They're thinking their mindset when they're going through the recruitment process at JP Morgan. There's a broad scope of interest among individuals. And so we spend time really trying to identify from our read of the resume and also from just talking with individuals that have an interest in finance, but also have shown or expressed an interest in some form or fashion in public policy, and that might be somebody who's interned at a congressional office, or somebody who's active in their student government, or somebody who's really interested in ESG, for example. But we do spend some time and focus in trying to cultivate, particularly those who have an interest in that, in public finance, to make sure that, it's the right fit all around.
So top of mind recently has been this whole return to work. I mean, I'd like to hear how things went during COVID from your perspective. I think for us, we found like people made the adjustment pretty well, and I think we've been productive, but it's hard to do training remotely, so I think it affects probably our younger lawyers the most, working remotely. So I'm curious to hear about that, and then sort of the plans to go back. Because I think a lot of investment banks, especially in New York, have said people should come back to the office, and maybe not always well received that mandate. But and we'll see what happens with the variant and everything. But.
Yeah, I know that, I think Jamie Dimon and others have said that they would like folks to come back to the office. And frankly, that has been sort of we've had many of our, my colleagues, particularly on the market side in the office throughout the pandemic, both, here in the US and in other parts of the world. I would say that, and we have really encouraged, the banking team to come into the office, on a rotational basis, trying to, really, adapt, particularly with the Delta variant now, just being sensitive to others, other people's concerns. But, it was a challenge for training last year, during the pandemic. I would say, let me step back more generally. I think like you, look, the way I looked at it is, and I think a lot of people, like yourself and others can say this, I'm one of the lucky ones. That's how I looked at it. Notwithstanding all of the craziness of the market that occurred certainly in March and April of 2020, I was fortunate that I had a job that I could do at home, a roof over my head, and I was still getting paid for it. And I constantly remind myself of that. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't times when it wasn't challenging or difficult, of course, but, and I think a lot of people feel that way, that, notwithstanding all of the challenges, that were presented maybe to us in terms of working remotely, that, we got ourselves through it, and we were able to serve our clients. We were able to serve each other as colleagues, frankly, whether it was informally talking through what was going on around us, or more formally talking about the things that were going on in 2020 around us, as well as serving our clients. I think we were able to get through that. And, I would say, though, with regard to your question around training, that was challenging, particularly last year. I would say that we managed through it, but it wasn't ideal. And I do think that there is something to be said. I have been back to the office, between Philadelphia and New York, since probably June. And there is something about seeing people in person that is really kind of, rejuvenating and exciting, when that happens. So I do think there is a benefit to having the opportunity to really collaborate, and kind of just reach out to the person next to you and say, hey, what about this? Or let's chat about that. So, we are this year doing training again, remotely, in part because many people are in regional offices. So I would say lessons learned from last year is, it's a little bit easier. We have the technology down a little better this year than we did a year ago. I would also say that it's also about just kind of, being thoughtful in the way that one is executing and communicating over Zoom, and making sure that people understand what is being talked about. And it also means like reaching out and checking in with people individually one-on-one. And I think that can really help as we work through sort of, coming out of this pandemic and maybe eventually getting back to doing a lot more in person.
Yeah, I certainly identify with a lot of what you just said. The challenges we faced were nothing compared to what other people did during COVID. Like you said, we had jobs and we were able to get our work done and serve our clients. And so, yeah, I think we've come out, pretty well. Well, I hope we're coming out of it. It feels like it's continuing at the moment. But you've mentioned technology a few times in this conversation. I'm just curious, like, did you start doing something different or did you add things? Like, we never used video before. We had the capability, but at our firm, we never really used Zoom or WebEx. And now I'm like, how did we survive without it? I actually do like seeing the person much more than being on the phone. So, um, was that a change for you guys, or did you use that before?
I think it was in part just, I think when I say technology, the market side of our group, where they were using some different sort of, virtual programs, was getting into Zoom, getting comfortable with Teams or, depending upon what particular, technology was being used. I think it was just getting comfortable with it, Emilie, to be honest, more so than anything. I going before the pandemic, and even at the beginning of the pandemic, when, people wanted to have Zoom calls just internally, to be honest, I wasn't at all inclined to get on a camera. I had no interest whatsoever. But I have eventually come around to the notion that it's not such a bad thing and it has its benefits. But I think there was a lot of that hesitation by some folks to get on. And then how do you use it? And then for us, doing training is sharing material. So trying to juggle, how do you share on a work document a piece of material you want to sort of train someone in, and then have the conversation as well going, on your Zoom call. So there was a little bit of that as well in terms of just working through the mechanics of what do we need to make sure that we upload, make available, send out by email, but also want to share. How will we share it if we're on a separate device over here on Zoom? So it was a lot of those little pieces that we just had to learn and work through.
Yeah, I mean, even before COVID, I think on the public finance side, we didn't get together for working group meetings like we used to. It was all by phone. But we used to still get together for a closing dinner here or there. That was nice. But I've been surprised how easily we've switched to closing our transcript, like not even a lot of times not having to have those originals put together and sent out every which way, because I guess most people access that electronically anyway. But I do miss, at least seeing people at least once during the transaction.
I would say one little perk, and it's not to say that it should take the place of in-person meetings, but I have found one nice, positive, if you will, outcome of having to do a lot of doing video meetings, particularly external with clients, is a lot of our analysts and associates who would not otherwise travel to attend a meeting can actually participate, even observe the meeting. And I think that's been great for them because it allows them to certainly observe and learn, how people are presenting or what questions clients ask. And it helps them to get vested, I think, in the work that we do. So, we'd always look to make an effort before the pandemic to invite them to in-person meetings, but it wasn't always as easy because of the travel time or because of the number of people going potentially. So that's, has been, I think, a nice silver lining in that regard.
Yeah. I mean, you have a big business development component of your practice, just like we do. And I thought that was the area that I found most challenging initially. Like, it's easier to maintain relationships you have already, with people. And we finally got used to being on camera, but it was like, how do you meet new people? And it's interesting because we actually found that, one, like you said, people from all across the country or different offices can easily meet together. But we also have a chance to talk sort of on a deeper level sometimes than we do if you're just at a cocktail party or something like that. So I don't know how you found that part of the practice to be as you're developing your clients.
I would say it's, as you said, those that it's easier in terms of reaching out and, maintaining the engagement. I think it's been a little bit harder not being able to be in person, that networking component that is a part of our business, and just it's in some ways I see it as more informal. You see someone out and about at a reception and you catch up with them, and it's just a different environment in which to engage about, what's going on in their life and what might be going on with regard to business. Sometimes I feel like there's a little more formality now when you reach out to clients, and some of them aren't, in the office, and I'm still like a little hesitant to call a cell phone. I don't know. I'm just, which is, you think I just need to get over that. But I just kind of grew up with the cell phone was always the secondary, the last phone you touched. So there's, to me, in some ways, there's, a little bit more recognizing the formality that comes with technology, that using technology that's become sort of a primary means by which we are engaging with people.
Yeah, I don't think anything can substitute fully for in-person interaction, but it is nice to have some other tools.
I think the advice I would give to my younger self, which is advice that I give certainly to my younger colleagues, and particularly young women, which is to don't be afraid to raise your hand. And in fact, you probably need to raise your hand. If you're looking to take on a new responsibility, if you're looking to assume more responsibilities, if you're looking for a promotion, if you're looking for a change, do not assume that being a hard worker and doing a good job is sufficient. And I know that is advice that people give all the time, but I think it's particularly important, and it's certainly something that I would give to my younger self if, and I think it's very important to understand the importance not only of networking, but also of stretching oneself. And when you're given so another example is you're given opportunity, and your first instinct is to say, I don't think I can do that. Actually stop yourself and say, how can I do that? Because I do think that women generally, aren't always ready to say, yep, I'm qualified, ready to do it. And yet they are, and they are ready, but they're, we have to know it 100%. We have to know we can do it perfectly. And it's going to get done right from the start. So women generally may not raise their hands. And what I would say is raise your hand, look for the opportunities, and stretch yourself, because every little bit of that stretch will build up over the course of your career and help you to make sure that you get to the place that you want to be.
That is great advice to end with. Mary, thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to actually having a conversation in person.
I look forward to it as well. Thank you so much, Emilie.
Thanks again to Emilie, Ninan, and Mary DiMartino. Make sure to visit our website, www.ballardspahr.com, where you can find the latest news and guidance from our attorneys. Subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, please email podcast@ballardspahr.com. Stay tuned for a new episode coming soon. Thank you for listening.